and welcome to this seminar in presence. Start having also seminar physical presence is quite helpful, right? It's a pleasure for me to host here Professor Roberto Gabriele, who is, in addition to a colleague, friends for years already. Roberto is a professor of applied economics at the University of Trento, where he's also research deputy, and he has different engagements in research projects and also a quite terrific score of publications. His main research interests are various in the field of applied economics. He's been working on industrial organization, on the labor markets, looking in particular at the question of training, and the paper he's going to present today is actually about training at the firm level. He has also competences in agent-based models, in case someone want to have a talk with him later on. He doesn't really have such a long time, but I think 10 minutes you can actually stay soon after the seminar, okay? Having said that, before leaving Roberto the floor, let me briefly remind you, rules of the game, basically for you, Roberto, because we others do already know it. We leave you up to a maximum 1 hour time for presentation. During the presentation, attendees or you can actually stop in to have clarifications on a spotlight basis, okay? And we postpone a more standard discussion at the end of the presentation, okay? So I will let you know when your time is up to be over, so that you know that we're going to have a discussion here also for a maximum of 1 hour time. And also for attendees on Zoom, rules applies the same for you. So the seminar is going to be recorded. So for those on the Zoom that does not want to be recorded, the usual rule applies. You can move on our YouTube channel, where Alessandro is actually watching whether there are questions from there, and in case there are questions, Alessandro will report them to Roberto, okay? So I think that I've said everything, Roberto, so the floor is yours. I move there so that I can see you better. And
Sandro, sorry. Can I interrupt just a second? From Zoom, we see you and let's say a small version of the presentation, but there is not the sharing of the screen within Zoom. Yes.
Here it seems full share already. No?
I guess no, because
okay.
It's a matter of camera, Sandro, I guess.
It's a matter of camera, but I don't
in the sense that we see the wide camera, and we see you physically.
Okay.
But there's not.
I will ask Velta to come and actually help us with that, okay?
Okay.
I think that Roberto can gradually start while I ask Velta to come and solve this issue, okay?
Sure.
Yeah, but it seems that it's connected from somewhere else, not from there. I don't know from where, actually. Okay, you can start gradually, and I will ask Velta to come, okay?
So let me just try to...
Okay, I remove the mask even that we have. You can use the mic so that we can hear you better.
Okay, I remove the mask because we have enough space. So let me just start with some, to thank some persons. So first of all, Sandro, because he invited me here. I must confess that I didn't know the GSSI before. I've never been here. So it was really a surprise for me, and also a pleasure, because I discovered a place in which there are several people that are interested to my point of view. So they do a lot of things that are overlapping with some of my interests. So it was nice because I discussed it with Sandro, with Luca, with Alessandro, so with several people here, and I discovered that for each one I have some let's say, interest in common. So that is something really relevant and interesting to me. Then I also obviously thank Alessandra for inviting me here. And so I will try to do my best, because it's a demanding, I mean, even the place is really a wonderful place. So I will try to do my best, okay? What I'm going to present today is a work in progress with my co-author Oksana Tokarchuk. It's a work in progress. We still don't have let's say, a paper. We have a draft of the paper. We have also a report written in Italian for, you will see, for this organization that is called Forum Dirigenti, but we still don't have a paper. So all the comments are extremely helpful, will be extremely helpful for us. So please, if you have comments or methodological comments, comments about the theoretical background, whatever, please don't hesitate to make this comment, because I will appreciate the fact that maybe we can improve the paper later on. Okay, so what we tried to do. So if you look at the title is the effect of female manager training on film productivity. It is an empirical investigation, and the context is the Italian context. So we work with firm level data for Italian firms, for a sample of Italian firms. Okay, now I can use this. So don't be afraid of this list that is pretty long, but maybe on some points we can be quite fast. The structure is quite standard. I hope that I was, successful in building a standard structure of the presentation. So I will present you some kind of an introduction to the topic and to our work. Then I try to put forward a motivation and with the related research question that we try to answer. Then some background literature, the empirical evidence on the topic that again is again literature. Then I will summarize a bit what the state of the art and our proposal, and then I present you the data and the results. Actually, there is the last point in which I also present future perspectives. And again, comments are welcome. So now what is interesting is that my screen is extremely small, so I cannot see anything. So maybe I have to move somewhere here to take a look at this computer. So I was thinking to start discussing about the why training. So training is a widely discussed topic in economics, in so many fields of economics. So the first question is why training? And I put here at least three, let's say, propositions that I found in literature that motivate the interest for training. So first of all, regardless of how training has been measured, there is a general support for a positive relationship between training and firm performance. So pay attention, here I'm talking about training provided to all different kind of employees. So whatever is the level of the workers, well, you provide training and you get a result. Okay, this is a broad proposition, I know. So this is the first point. So second point is a point on which we discussed a lot with my co-authors, because it's some kind of, we are looking for why the effort is there. So why, when you provide training, you get the result in terms of firm performance? That it seems a trivial aspect, but it is not at all. So if you look at the literature, we found what this concept of transfer of training. I mean, that means transfer of what you learn during the training into actions that you perform during your work activity. Okay, and if you look at this literature, well, there is a famous, let's say, starting from Baldwin and Ford. So it's a long time ago. And also Sachs is more recent as a contribution. Well, I summarized their contribution. I mean, I was a bit, how to say, I extremely summarized their concept. But basically, the transfer of training is this application, generalization, maintenance of learning, training skill and behavior from the training environment to the work environment. So they found, okay, there is this transfer. And this transfer is at the heart of the result that you can find. Then the last point is, okay, but it's also interesting to see that when you look at the literature, training is measured in many different ways. So here in this slide, I just put some of these measures. They are extremely different one another, and they can bring, in some cases, to different results. So here I summarize, for example, absolute measures, proportional measures. So, for example, the amount of training, whatever is the measure, so I don't know, for example, the hours of training for each employee is an absolute measure of training. And there are several kind of absolute measure. Another one is the amount of money that firms is spending on one employee to train this employee. Okay. Then there are proportional measures in which you try to, to build some kind of relative measure of training. So, for example, you can use the percentage of workers that are trained inside the firm as a measure of intensity of training at firm level. But this is just an example where there are several kind and different measures. Then there are content measures in which you try to open up the black box of the training. So, for example, you can try to understand if different types of training can have different effects. And this is something that you will see. We didn't exploit this dimension, but this is something that we would like to do in the future. There are also, the last one, this Tarenu that we mentioned there, it's interesting that we don't go in this direction, but it's an interesting measure that it's worthwhile at least to mention it. That is also possible to build a, I would say, more psychological measure of training, let me call these particular measures, in which there is the measure is built on some kind of a perception of the workers with respect to the training that is provided to them. That is something different, is subjective, less reliable from a statistical point of view, let me just say, but it's interesting because sometimes the same amount of training can have different effects if it's perceived in a different way. So it is a topic that is at least worthwhile to mention, let's say. So let me just show you this slide because this is a meta-analysis due to Tarenu in co-authors in 2007. Well, just to mention you that they found 67 studies about training, and they found in general, as I was telling you, that training is positively related with organizational performance. Whatever is the measure of the organizational performance, because obviously in these papers you find different objective variables, let's say, so different organizational performance variables. But in general, well, it seems promising that, well, is exactly what I told you some slides ago. There is a general consensus about the fact that, okay, training has to be a positive effort, and the empirical evidence suggests that this is exactly the case. So if you train the workers, well, you get a result in terms of organizational performance. Then, but actually, we don't study the training for all the workers, for all the kind of workers. We study training for, let's say, for a subset of these individuals in the firm, and actually we study the managers. So what we can call senior managers. In Italian there's a word for this kind of managers that they are called dirigenti. Well, dirigenti has not a direct translation to my view in English. So for example, if you refer to middle managers, well, there is an overlapping, but maybe it's a different, I mean, there's also only a partial overlapping with this concept of middle manager. So we study dirigenti. That means managers that are not at the top level. Okay, so they are not the CEO of the firm. They are managers that are responsible for particular functions, for example, in the firm, and so on and so forth. Well, there are some studies about this. So here I mention a couple of them. For example, Morris in 2016. Morris is interesting, and I put the name here. Why? Because when you think about managerial training, well, the training has to be intended in different ways. So in particular, Morris talks about this firm-specific training, suggesting that in a way, what you learn with the training inside one firm, it's not so easily possible to be applied in another firm if you move from one firm to another. Well, that is something which we can discuss, especially if you go in depth in this direction. So if you are able to open up the black box of the training with different, for example, different methodologies used, different teams that are treated. So for example, we have some information about the leadership programs that they follow. Well, there are some kind of training that are firm specific, as Maurice is suggesting, and there are others that are less firm specific. So in a sense, even this conclusion of Maurice has to be taken seriously and has to be investigated further, according to us. And we didn't do so much in this direction, I must confess. Then Floyd and Woodridge, well, they say, okay, why you find an effect? What is the rationale behind the potential effect of the training for managers? Well, they say, well, very likely they are involved in strategy, so they can change the strategy of the firm, and through this involvement at upper level, let's say, they can have an effect on organizational performance. But it's also true that they have also relationship with the lower levels of the hierarchy of the firm. So, for example, they can improve the performance of some kind of functions in the firm. So, human relations, for example, or operations, and so on and so forth. So, this is the rationale that if you look for a rationale, you have to think about this particular position inside the organization of these managers. The last point is important, you will see later on when I mention explicitly the contributors to this field. They say, okay, training has an effect because actually force or push managers to use different practices. Well, practices is a word that is, let's say, interesting and informative about in this field because it was introduced by Bloom and Van Rienen and several coders, Raffaella Sadun and other coders. And working on this topic, they discovered that let me put it in this way, competencies can be codified, or at least there's a way of codifying competencies inside the firm for the managers. And the way is to classify all different practices that a firm is using to perform their actions. And it's pretty interesting. So they have these categories that is a hierarchical taxonomy in which... is there a question? Okay. It's a hierarchical taxonomy of these practices that are used. And if you change the practices, maybe there's someone with the microphone open. Oh. Okay, can you turn off the microphone, please? I don't have access to there, so... Ok.
Col cazzo, faccio tutto io? No, quello no, quello mi incazzo. No, allora mi incazzo, perché io ho fatto una gara solo, io faccio tutti gli affinamenti milioni di euro l'anno. Oh, ma che cazzo, però vengo di nato, quello che ho fatto
people on the Zoom, could you please turn off the mic? Hello?
I wrote to her, but she's not reading actually.
Okay, we can wait 2 minutes. Okay, maybe they solved the problem. Okay, let me recap the last the last slide. Okay, so I was talking about practices, and I was explaining the point of view of Bloom, Van Rienen, and coders, and they say basically if you are able to build a classification of
switch. It's me.
no, it's okay. So let's try to, no, now everything is fine. Okay, so it's possible to codify the competencies if you are able to, elicit different practices with respect to different functions inside the firm. So for example, you can understand that you can ask to the firm if they are using some incentive schemes to pay the workers. Well, you can have this incentive scheme at work or not. So it's something that you can codify. And there is a classification with, if I'm not wrong, 16 different categories, and within each category you have a subset. So it's something interesting because you can build an indicator and then you can judge according to the practices that they're using the performance of firm. And they found positive results. So later on I will come back to this topic because it's something that we will need. Okay, so so far we discussed about training in general. Then I suggest that we focus on a subset of training, the training devoted to managers. Now, the last step that we need is to explain why do we focus on women. Alessandro?
Yeah, before you move on the core of your presentation, I was wondering, the kind of training you are
I'm going to touch this point, but I can explain you now. Okay, the point. Okay, you will see that the kind of training that the information about training that we have available is an information about, due to the fact that all these firms in our sample are enrolled in these fondi dirigenti. Fondi dirigenti is part of Confindustria, and is the part of Confindustria in which, I mean, the firm, they enroll their managers inside these organizations, so that these organizations, and they pay a fee to the IMPS, and then they have a budget available to train these managers. So I'm simplifying a lot. So they simply have a budget available. They can spend the budget in the way that they like. So they can organize in-house courses, or they can refer to an external organization, doesn't matter, okay? Then we have some information also about this, okay? That is not so easy to exploit. It's a long story, given the data availability is one of the issues that we usually have when we work on empirical work. So you will see, so there are different, so for example, we know that there are online training provided to these guys. In other cases, they organize seminars. In other cases, they organize simulations and something like this. So you can find really different things inside this. So indeed, one of the future perspectives will be for us to try to exploit also this heterogeneity of training and try to find a connection between the type of training and women, you will see. But it's something that we are going to do in the future. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Oh. So I don't know if they answered, they listened to the question, maybe not. So the question was about if this money is devoted especially to women or not. No, the money is available for the firm. Firm can decide. Okay. So let me just now make the last step. So women, because the typical question is, okay, why do you expect that if you are training a manager, if it's a woman, it's different? Well, there are some theories that actually are going in this direction. So for example, one is really coming from a long time ago, this upper echelon theory. The upper echelon theory, I simplified a lot. I mean, just in one sentence, it is something that, I mean, there are several papers written about this topic, so I really am not generous with this literature. But they basically, they suggest, this literature suggests that diversity and quality of manager can bring positive results to firm performance. Well, one of the dimensions of the diversity is exactly the gender diversity. And there are even sociological and psychological reasons to explain and to sustain this point of view. Other dimensions are, for example, the different backgrounds inside the pool of managers that a firm has. If you have different backgrounds, this is something beneficial for firm. So this is one of the first points. So the second contribution is Zeko and Ross, 2012, suggests another interesting thing, that is the mechanism of transmission of the effect. So, okay, they say there is diversity, but why this diversity has an effect? So Zeko and Ross suggest that there is a mediator, let's say, that is innovation. So if you have female leadership, well, this is related with higher innovation inside the firm. So again, okay, you can go in depth in this literature, but this seems quite convincing. So for particular reasons, there are gains that firm can do in terms of innovation. And obviously, what is the organizational performance? Well, is the effect of this enhanced organization, innovation at firm level. Let me just say something, important. Well, all these theoretical contributions are related with the top management. So not so much is said about the lower level of managers. So all these contributions, well, they put some points and they reach some results, but they are not so satisfying for us because we are referring to a slightly different set of managers, okay? So for example, here you have some contributions of this Kirsch, for example, 2018, is a contribution that goes in our direction. So they try to also analyze lower level managers, not top level managers. But there isn't so much. So maybe this is also another additional motivation for our study, okay? Then let me just give you another explanation of why women can be important. That is a more psychological, if you like. And we have these alien coders that did this particular study. They found basically that is the fact that women are in general less aggressive. And this is pretty interesting to my view because it's a psychological background behind the result that can be something. I mean, I don't buy entirely the story, but it can be something interesting. So they say they are less aggressive in sustaining their views. So maybe they are not able to pursue particular strategies, and moreover, the women seems to be less risk averse. Okay, so if this is true, more risk averse. Okay, so this is something that we have to take into account. Okay, what is in this case the role of the training? Well, the training can function as create a safe environment in which this attitude is modified artificially. Then the transfer that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation is something that can be useful to transfer this modified, aggressive degree of women into the real world, into the putting in place new strategies and so on and so forth. So this is something that, again, I don't buy entirely the story, but it can be something as a background of this effect, let's say. So let me just summarize now what we said. So, okay, we found that there is a link, a causal nexus between managerial, what I call training, vocational training, and firm performance, organization performance. We found literature that says that, okay, there's a role for female managers in terms of their effect on the organizational performance. There is a gender bias, whatever this means, the gender bias in the decisions of firms. So let me just put simply, women and men decide differently, and this affects the strategy of firms. And the last point is, okay, obviously there's a vivid debate about the role of women managers. So these are all facts that, according to us, in a sense, motivate our research, okay? So what we try to do is we try to focus on the training for this woman, for these managers. We try to not to focus on top managements, because on this part of the story there's a lot, but we don't know so much about the lower level. We focus on smaller firms, and this is also another interesting aspect that I didn't touch so much until now. All the research in this about these topics, well, are referred to larger organizations. Why? Because that are more easily obtainable. For smaller firms, it's extremely difficult. In our case, we have the Italian sample of firms. In this case, we have firms that are smaller. So maybe this can change even the dynamics of this effort, and maybe in some cases they can be even different results. Okay, you can expect even different results. So this is the reason why we decided to go on with this particular topic. Now, let me just go back for a while to the theoretical background of this study. So if you ask me, what do you think there is behind this effort of training? Well, my answer would be what I call here with the question mark, the evolutionary view. Meaning that, okay, what I will suggest you is that training is a way to update the capabilities of firm. So you know that there is an old story from Teaser, there's a huge literature about this. The result of firm, the organizational performance is due to the resources, okay, the resource-based view, and also to capabilities entailing the human capital, entailing the management. Well, what I suggest is that maybe training is a way to update the capability. If you look inside this literature, there's even something more, but indeed that is almost not possible to pronounce, proto-Geroux encoders, they say, oh look, learning capability is actually one of the dynamic capabilities of the firm. That is something interesting, because now it's not something that can change the dynamic capability, it's part of the dynamic capability itself. So when you invest in training, you are investing in your dynamic capabilities. That we know is one of the way of maintaining and sustaining the famous concept of competitive advantage of firm. So if you think from an evolutionary point of view, you have even selection of the firm is shaped by the training in the end, because training as a relationship is part of the dynamic capability. So this is my way of looking at this point. Now, if you look for a more standard approach, that is an approach that we also take into account, you will see, because even in the choice of our variables, of our objective and control variables, we refer to this contribution. That is the contribution of Bloom and Van Reenen. And they say training devoted to manager has a positive impact on their practices, as I was explaining you. So they say, okay, we codify, in a sense, the capabilities inside these practices. Training is modifying the practices, so they are suggesting is modifying the capabilities. So this is the reason why you have an effort. It's a more standard point of view, but more or less, to my view, they arrive to the same conclusion. Training has an effect on what the skills, what a firm is able to do, is capable to do, and this will end up in a particular organizational performance. Now, okay, as I told you, now, literature, but empirical literature. There's a vast literature about the training and employees. So I decided not to show you any contribution because there is really a long list. I mean, at the beginning I showed you this meta-analysis in which there were 67 studies, but there are even more, okay? Let me just mention, obviously, the Bloom and Van Reenen contribution. That is an empirical, I mean, they did many empirical works. And they found, I mean, I mentioned this because what is interesting is the measure of outcomes that they have chosen as to measure organizational performance. And they have chosen productivity, profitability, growth rate, survival rate, and market values. And for all these objective variables, they found positive a positive association with what they call management score. The management score of a firm is a codification, a collection of all the aspects that I was telling you. So you have these 16 different practices. Well, you add up all the dummies, 1, 0s, and then this will form your management score. The higher is the management score, the better is your performance. In all the respect, actually, yeah, okay. One example I did some minutes ago is the example of this incentive scheme in place or not. So in human resources management, you can have different kind of styles, let's say, the way in which you pay the workers. Let me call in general incentive schemes. Okay, this is an example. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Job rotation is one of the possible dimensions of this human resources management. Okay. Then if we have enough time, then I can show you the original table of Bluno and Van Riemen, in which you have all the list that is taken from a paper that they publish, okay? Okay, then let me mention some results that we found on a previous study. In 2017, we published a study in which we used a different time period, but more or less the same sample of firms that are extracted from this fondi-dirigente organization, basically. And we found a positive result of training, but what was interesting is that we found this inverted U-shaped relationship. That is something that at the beginning was a bit puzzling for us, because we were thinking, okay, the more you train the managers, the more you get. But why at a certain point you start to have some, in a sense, negative results? Well, we ended up with an explanation that suggests that basically when you are training a manager, you are taking this manager from the job for a period and you train him. Okay, so there is something that you pay. But indeed, this is pretty interesting, in the database that Fondirigenti builds for administrative reasons, there's also a variable that it's called something like lost wage, lost income of these managers. So for each manager, you see that there is a number. So this number is correlated with, let's say, with the activities that the manager was not able to do because it was spending time in training. So for example, I know that they build this number taking a look at the remuneration of the guys and also the number of hours that this guy is devoting to training. So if for 8 hours is out of the game because he's in training, well, you know more or less what is the income that you are losing for him, but also for the firm. Okay, so this is the idea. So,
sorry,
yes?
Can I ask a spotlight question?
Yeah, come on.
My question is, do you consider when you do this kind of analysis on the effect on the long run of training, do you consider also the type of training? So in some way, do you differentiate between, I don't know, compulsory training or something that the manager is choosing by himself or something like that?
No, okay. No, unfortunately not. We don't have this information. So we just see if a manager is in training or not, but we don't know. We don't know the reason why. So we have some information about the type of training that we exploited, but nothing about the, I would say, voluntary training. Okay, if they ask or not the training. Okay, another question. Okay, in this case, I mean, the question, I summarized the question. The question is about what kind of training, in particular leadership. Well, there is also leadership as a possible training, but here we are considering all the kind of training together. Okay. Then we have some results for disaggregated for the methodology and for the kind of the training. Okay. Things are a bit different, but more or less this is the main result. Okay. So let me go back to this inverted U shape. That is something that I was telling. Okay, it's interesting because so there are also these economies of training a manager, basically what we are saying, and there are obvious. I mean, for all the motivation that I put forward at the beginning of the seminar is you should have also economies of training some managers. So the positive effort should be there, and there is. Then there is also something interesting that you have to take into account. Okay, so don't let me use the blackboard, otherwise those online are not able. So I try to summarize in words what I have into my mind. So when you have a U-shaped relationship, well, this does not mean that you experiment the negative version of the story, so the negative relationship between training, for example, and productivity. Why? Because you have data only for an interval. And this is exactly what happened to us. So in a sense, this curvature of the positive relationship is telling us that you have decreasing the returns to scale, to this training. Not that you have negative results. Okay, that is pretty counterintuitive. Indeed, it's not like this. So it's not a straight line, it's something that will become flatter if you train too much, okay? So this is the reason of this inverted U shape, to be precise. And why I'm mentioning now this, and I'm spending some words about this, because in the present work, we don't find this inverted U shape relationship. We just find a positive relationship. That is quite interesting. So we were puzzled by these results. Let me just anticipate something about the results. That is, you don't see this flattening of the curve, basically, of the relationship. So we discussed a lot about this, even with from dirigenti, and even with some managers to understand. Well, in the end, our conclusion is something like this. Nowadays, with all these Industry 4.0 changes, so the adoption of new technologies, let me just put in this way, there's a need of upgrading a lot the capabilities. So the more you train, the more they need. And so you don't see this flattening of the curve because you need a lot, okay? And they are not able to fulfill this demand, even with all these funds. So ideally, maybe they need even more training, and they are not able to provide additional training. So this is the reason why you don't reach the threshold at which you start to have decreasing results, so basically. Okay, so this study in which we found this inverted relationship is related to the period of 2006-2011 in Italy. Our study is from 2007-2018. Actually, the first year are lost, so let me just say that the time window is from 2010 to 2018. Okay. So just to show you that there is a partial overlapping between the two periods, but the periods are differentiated and so, okay? So let me just cut a bit the presentation, okay? Because this is, again, about the motivation why you can find effects. So let me just cut this because we already discussed about this. So let me just summarize at this point, 15 minutes. So I don't summarize this, okay? Because, okay, no, you are right. So let me just discuss about the data, because this is the first important point. So we were able to collect a sample from this fondi dirigenti organization. That is, they have this, how to say, administrative database of all the firms enrolled in fondi dirigenti in this organization. So they are around nowadays 23,000. So if you ask me what are the sector, well, in the sector in which they are present, the sample is representative of the Italian population. There are some sectors that are not represented at all because they refer to another organization. So for example, we don't have any bank here. Banks are not in this sector, so this sector is not here. Then there is also, and this is something that we didn't exploit so much, we just control for this factor, but I mean, we can discuss about this. is there is also differentiation and heterogeneity with respect to the region in which the firms are enrolled in this organization. So we have some regions in which these firms are pretty well represented. So, for example, Lazio, Lombardia, but for others, I mean, they are in trouble. So we know that you cannot generalize the results, for example, for some part of the regions of south of Italy, because they are in trouble there. So we were able to get from this source information about the training, the type of training, the intensity, the number of employees and the number of managers. And then we were able to put there also all the balance sheet and profit and losses account figures. So we were able to build a lot of indicators working with, in particular with the Bureau van Dijk, but we used also Servet because if you use only Bureau van Dijk, you have some holes in the observation, so you had to even to work manually to add some information. And obviously, directly from IMPS, we have the information about number of employees and number of managers. And this is important because it's pretty precise as a measure. And this was provided to Fondi Dirigenti directly by IMPS. And that's it. This is the only information that we have from IMPS. You will see, this is the reason why we have something into our mind. So, let me also just say that when you clean the sample, when you decide to exclude some sectors in which you don't have so much firms represented, we ended up working with around 6,000 firms, okay, more or less, okay. Then we have some missing values for some variables, so when you use some variables, you lose additional observation as usual, let's say. So, but this is the starting number of firms that we are able to use. All served for this period of time, 9 years, okay? So let me just say something about the variable that we use, that were able to use. As objective variable, we were able to estimate the total factor productivity of firm. And let me just make a parenthesis. And this is one huge deviation from my evolutionary view, okay? Because total factor productivity is based on some version of a production function that is completely at odds with the evolutionary explanation. But let me also just add something aside. If you work with labor productivity, you don't get results that are so different. So we are pretty confident that, let me just put it this way. If you don't use TFP, but you use labor productivity to be more coherent with the evolutionary view, well, to publish is extremely difficult. Okay, let me just put it this way. But we have also result about labor productivity, actually. Then, dependent variable of interest for us should be a measure of training. In particular, we use the training hours per manager. And as a second important variable of interest, we use the percentage of hours of training dedicated to female manager. So if you are a firm, you decide to train 15 managers, for example, well, we know also the percentage of women. These are independent. Yeah, that's true. There's a typo there. There's a typo. It's not the only typo that I found while I was talking, so sorry for this. It's the independent variables, it's our variable of interest. Then we have also other independent variables that are control variables, that are those that I mentioned there, age, size, sector, region, etc. But let me spend some words again on these two variables, because one of the problems was at the beginning, okay, if you take a look at the correlation between training and hours of training for men and women, well, there is a high correlation. So this is the reason why we were not able to use these two absolute measures, if you like. So we had to come out with an idea. And the idea was to use the overall hours devoted to training inside the firm. Well, this relative measure is just one of the relative measures that we use. I mean, we are confident why in using this measure, because the literature suggests that doesn't matter the measure of that you use as intensity of training, the result should be there. So in the end, we have several versions, but this one is the more convincing one. That is a relative measure that is pretty interesting. That is not correlated with the percentage of women. So this was kind of a trick to avoid an econometric problem, because if you use the two hours, well, they are correlated. If you use the percentage, this is not correlated. Okay, so we were thinking, okay, this is something that we can use. Actually, there is also another important variable that you will see when I show you the methodology. Tell me how much time do I have? Okay. Okay, thank you. That is an instrument, something that we use as an instrumental variable. So what is the general problem that we have? The general problem is a problem of reverse causality, if you like, endogeneity in econometric terms. That is, or it could be that if a firm is providing more training, is a better firm, so has an higher TFP. So when you do a regression in which you put TFP and training in the two sides of the equal sign, well, you find the result because there is this double causal nexus. So you had to solve this. So we thought, okay, we can do several things. So one thing that we did, for example, was to use GMM. Okay, and this was a solution using internal instruments. But then we found this variable, that is the amount of videos available on this conto formazione. That is, when firm is paying to IMSS the fee to enroll their managers to this fondo dirigenti, well, IMSS is giving back 0.3% of this amount of money. So in the end, there is some kind of, like a draw, in which there is some money that firms can spend for training. Okay, this is something strange, but there is even more. We discovered that not all the firms spend all the money each year. So let's say they have 10,000 euros to spend each year for this training activity. Well, we found that part of them spend this amount of money, others they don't spend this amount of money. So it's a pretty strange behavior. And well, we don't have a precise reason why, actually, at this moment. Well, if you take a look at this variable is highly correlated with the training, because if there's money, they do training. But it's not correlated at all with TFP, with the all labor productivity, whatever is the objective variable. So we thought, okay, we can use it as an instrument, because it can solve this endogeneity problem that I was talking about. Yeah. No. No, it's not. No, the reason is the fact that I was explaining you that they don't spend all the amount of money every year. So if they have 10,000 euros, some of them spend 10,000 euros, some of them don't spend at all, some of them spend 1,000 euros, and so on and so forth. So you don't find any correlation for this. Because this was one of the first questions that we asked, actually. So there isn't, actually.
Oh, yeah. Roberto, quick question. Let me try to summarize. So you observed in your data, on, let's say, extensive margin, all firms applying for the subsidy, training subsidy, and then you also observe an intensive margin measure and the amount of funds spent on training for each firm.
No, actually, there isn't an application. If you enroll in Fondirigenti, you have this amount of money, depending on the number of managers that you enrolled in this organization, and then you can spend the money.
But you only have observations of firms who applied for...
They registered for Fondirigenti, obviously, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this is another important point that I can anticipate. That is, do you have a sample selection?
The question is, I make a question.
Okay.
The question is, of course, the intensive margin measure, the amount spent on training is itself a source of selection into treatment, just because it just measures the amount, your propensity to invest on good managers, let's say.
Okay, so let me see if in the next slide I will convince you that we try to address this problem. But let me put it this way, is a problem with self-selection. Another important aspect is that from the population of the firms that are registered for this Fondirigenti organization, the active firms, meaning that firms that in one of the years that we have under investigation are providing training or are using this money to let the managers to be trained, well, they are not so much. And this is something that is a well-known problem in Italy, let me just say, not only for firms in my sample, but it is a general problem. We don't train too much. And this is even more true when you restrict to managers. Okay, so I will show you at a certain point a table in which I show you that, I mean, only the minority of firms are active. So in a sense, we have many firms that are there, they can potentially do the training, but they don't do. And they are helpful for, according to us, to identify the effect, okay? Because they are similar to the others that are treated, in a sense. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, maybe it's me.
Scheme, the fondirigenti. So you've got firms which are paying money into these fondirigenti. And is this a pension scheme? Like, is it managed by INPS? I don't know what it is.
Oh, no, it's not managed by INPS. I mean, okay. INPS, the only action that INPS is doing is giving back some money. Okay. It's a small percentage of the fees that they pay.
Are the money that goes into fondirigenti the money that are spent for training?
Yeah.
Okay, and then basically INPS is paying back, is basically cashing back some money to the firm with this conto formazione.
Yeah.
And what does the conto formazione does? What is it for? I don't understand.
What do you mean? So what does? I mean, they don't do anything, and they give back the money. So if a firm is saying, okay, I need 10,000 euros to train my managers, they give back the money. That's it. Right.
And so you use this as an instrumental variable. The amount, the cash back is an instrumental variable.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so then we can discuss about this. Okay. What is the methodological approach that we follow? Let me just summarize. So I go directly to the equations. So first we estimate TFP, and we use the Levison and Petrin, but nothing changes if we use a different algorithm, basically. The lower letter are logarithms, so basically is a production function in which you try to solve the problems of endogeneity using the materials and so on and so forth, the standard approach of Levison and Petrin. So we have this TFP estimation, and then we estimated the probability of training, so the probability of being active, as I call this particular action some minutes ago, for a firm, based on a series of observable characteristics. So for example, I put size, age, and the sector, and also time, actually. And then I run an instrumental variable, including also the inverse mean ratio in the instrumental variable regression, in which we included the variable of interest, the two independent variable of interest, the inverse mean ratio, and a series of additional controls. Okay, so this is the structure of the work. What can you find inside the observable characteristic is size, age, geographic control, size control, years dummies, and so on and so forth. Okay, we already discussed about this. Now maybe it's impossible, almost impossible to see, but let me just mention some numbers in this table. If you take a look at the number of active firms, we are talking about 6,400 firms active. All the rest of the sample, that if you take a look at, these are firms' years observations. We have more than 100,000 observations that are firms that are not active. Okay, so only a small percentage is active in this respect. Then let me just show you this 38%. This is the percentage of training hours devoted to female managers. So 38%, less than half. Okay. And moreover, it's also interesting to see another number, 36%. That is the firms that involve at least one female manager in training. So if you like, this tells us something about the concentration of the phenomenon. So only a minority of firms is training also women, and the training, the amount of training that is provided to them is not so big compared to those of men, okay? Now, let me show you the results. So the first number, this 0.25 at 0.26, is the, let's say, the result about the positive connection between the past TFP and the oh no, maybe, okay, no, sorry, this is something about probability. So sorry, I was running a lot because I know that I'm running out of time, so I'm just trying to run. So let me just not show you the probability estimation, okay? It's interesting because you can find some numbers and some significant connections between observable characteristics and strength. It's worthwhile to analyze, but we don't have enough time. So let me just mention here, column number 1, you have the, let's say, the baseline effort. So the training per manager measure that is positively related with the TFP. So you have this 1.65, that is the coefficient that is significant. Both variables are in logs, so it's just the percentage, let's say, effect that you have when you train on 1% additional percentage point on TFP. Then we added in column 2 the percentage of women, and we still get a significant result for this coefficient, even if it's pretty small. But we discussed it and we thought a bit about this, and we did some, let's say, simulation to understand what is the effect of this variable. According to us, it's not so small, because the effect is on the logarithm of the dependent variable. So it's something that if you combine the two effects, so we did, let me just show you this table. This is a table in which we made some calculation that what is necessary to, let's say, to move in the ranking of TFP of firms, okay? So if you take the different firms in different positions of this ranking, well, and you hypothesize, let's say, some training intensities and some additional percentage point of training for women, well, you get the ability of this firm to go up in this ranking of the distribution. Okay, that is something interesting because if you have the point of view of, how to say, of the evolutionary view, well, it could be that you are sorted out from the distribution if you are at the lower positions in this distribution. So in a sense, we are saying that maybe the impact is not negligible, and it's something that is relevant for sustaining the competitive advantage of firm. Let me at least mention another interesting result that can be one of the future directions of this study. That is, if you concentrate on one sector, science and technology as Pavit defined this sector, and you try to redo the exercise, what you get is a stronger effect. A stronger effect both for the training and for the impact of women. That is something that, well, it's interesting if you think about what I said, let's say, half an hour ago, when I said that innovation is the mediator between the effort on TFP and training for women. Well, it seems that when you are in this sector where innovation is more important and the effort is stronger. So let's say I put this slide there, but it's something on which we have to think a bit and maybe we go a bit more in depth. Okay. Now, another important, so the computer is doing something, I don't know what, but doesn't matter. No, it's not my computer. My computer is here. Okay, why women are beneficial for TFP? So I decided to put here at least 3 explanations because this can be 3 possible explanations. So first explanation, selection. So women are more selected at a higher level. So we know that it's more difficult to become managers, especially if you're in the top position, if you ramp up the positions. Well, so if you are a woman and you are a manager, you are better because you are more selected than men. So first reason why empirically you see this effort, okay? Second point, it can be, okay, it can be that firms with women are better. So if you like a kind of endogeneity problem. So maybe if I had to listen to your colleague that was asking question about the instruments, maybe this can be, there is one related with this observation. So if you were not able to clean for all the selection, well, you can get the result. And this can be a second, hopefully not, but it can be one explanation. And the last one is, in general, women are better than men. So I call these, they have more potential, they have hidden firm capabilities entailed that they are able to exploit when they are trained. And the paper that I mentioned half an hour ago about these psychological behavior, aggressiveness, risk aversion degree, and so on and so forth, goes exactly in this direction. So this can be three possible explanations. So what are the future perspectives? So first line is related maybe with the reason why I'm here, Sandro, maybe because we know that there are regional patterns in these results. And we have some hints here and there from these results that this result is not homogeneous in all the different regions. So there could be patterns that are, we can even put forward some hypotheses why in Lombardia you have a result, and while in Lazio you have other results. You have to consider that you have also to take into account the different composition of sectors in the region. So it's not an easy task to compare the result for two different regions, because it can be a composition effect, that's it, of sectors. So for example, in Lazio we have many services, while in Lombardia we have more manufacturing. Maybe the difference is due to the different composition. So we have to investigate a bit more this dimension to understand what are the sources of this heterogeneity. But regions can be one of these particular reason why we see differences, and maybe why, because there is a sociological difference, a cultural difference in the role of women in different contexts. The second point is about deepen the motivation of the result, I said, but actually what we did is we did an application for visit IMSS. Why? Because if we are able to get data from IMSS, we are able to get wages, information about the age, maybe education and type of contract. So we can enrich the set of information available, we can refine the result. So, Sandro, I was, okay, that's all, thank you.
Okay, Roberto, thank you very much. I'm sorry to have implicitly put some pressure on time, but I mean,
I can understand.
Still have some time. So we have a rule here, which is generally we leave a sort of priority to PhD students if they have questions to raise. There's already one here, and the same applies to people on the Zoom, where we have also a number of PhD students. So I think we should look, okay, we can't really operate on the Zoom, guys. So if you have questions, just speak. Because I've seen there's something on the chat, but we can't, I mean, personally I can't. So if you have questions, just speak and say you want to talk, okay? But let me start with Laura. Here, the mic.
Okay, this is the moment in which I must be worried.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
I have a comment question. The first thing that comes to my mind when you first presented was as you mentioned at the end, the selection problem that usually is a concern when talking about female managers. And not only the selection process, so that the firm selected more, but also the self-selection, that usually women do not apply for a higher job if they, let's say men feel a little bit more overconfident when they apply, and women do not. So there's also a problem of self-selection, not only selection. And so this is what I was thinking, and I was thinking, as you said, that you can control at the end for, let's say, education. So maybe female managers are more educated or trained already when they are arrived in this position. But also that I didn't see, so I don't know if you have tried to control for the percentage of female managers already in the firms, because you said about the hours they invest in training for women, but I didn't understand if you consider the percentage of female managers already in the firm. So maybe it's just that they are less and not that they spend less money on them. So I don't know if it makes sense. And yeah, mostly that's the question. So
okay, let me
Thank you.
try to. So for the first, your interpretation about self-selection is true. So it's also what we think. This can be, I mean, there are several, let's say, studies that says that is exactly the case. We were discussing yesterday, taking a coffee, that, I mean, I remember years and years ago, Miriam Mariani was presenting a paper about gender pay gap differences for inventors in that case. And after they cleaned for all the possible confounders, they ended up, I mean, it was Miriam Mariani, a woman, saying something like this, they are earning less because they don't ask. This was something that surprised me. But then thinking about this, thinking of this result and thinking about what the literature that we met, where we discovered, okay, this can be true. It's something even cultural, if you like. So this is true. It can be an explanation. Education. Well, this is something that is extremely important to have. I mean, we don't have this information at all. And this is problematic because, for example, we know that there are some gender patterns even in these STEM disciplines. So we know that women are better in STEMs. So we know that they can have an effect. So it could be something that I don't know if entering in IMSS can provide us also this information, but it's something that we try to do because it's extremely difficult to get. Let me just say that in Trento we have a project that is called Lamaco, in which we try to study managerial dynamics in general. We have at least three directions going on, in which what we are trying to do is to build a database in which we have information about Italian managers. Also information about the career, and education, and so on and so forth. And then what we try to do is to try to let's talk this different field, different line of research to understand if some of these, at least the interpretation that we put forward are supported. Okay, so given that we don't have a direct possibility of linking this data, well, we work on another different database and we try to highlight and single out this particular aspect. Then the last point is a key point. It's a crucial point on which we know that we have a problem. And again, this is the reason why we would like to enter IMSS, because we don't have the information about the number of women. And this is really a shortcoming. We know this is a big issue for us. So this was also behind our choice of the variable of interest. We thought a lot, we refined a bit, and then we come out with this version that is the best that we can do given the available data. Okay, let me just put in this way. As usual, you have to counterbalance the desires and then the problems that you have empirically.
Tess Andrea?
Well, thank you for the presentation. Yeah, I was thinking that maybe there are like two different things or two models that from one side, the one that is related to the productivity that are explaining by firm factors. But the fact of training, I think that there are more factors related to to the human that are doing the training. And I was thinking if this training is during the labor hours, or you have to do it a part of that. This is the first question, if you know that. And also, if you could add like information about the woman, I think that could be very helpful. Not only the education, but also maybe the age or previous job, because my feeling is that the effect of the training could be different depending on personal characteristics. So yeah, and related to the productivity one, I separate. Sorry, I was thinking if you can see if there is like a lag on the effect. I don't know if you train this year, the effect you are seeing in the same time, or you are considering that. I don't know, you do the course this year and you apply what you learn next year. I don't know if I'm clear. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let me just start from the last one. So I don't know if I get the question the right way, but in the models there are time lag, that 1 year time lag. So you have training and then we look for results the year after. Okay, because I mean, if you don't do so, it's pretty counterintuitive, because you can do training in December, but the result is something strange. So at least 1 year is necessary. Then if you're asking me, but are you sure that they are so short-run results? So let me put it different. Can it be that you have also longer time span results? Well, it can be. It's something that if you have a longer panel, you should do. You should see, for example, if the effect is just a peak or is permanent, or if it's increasing or decreasing. So it can be interesting to do this, but you must have different data, let's say, longer longitudinal panel, let's say. Then you are right, we need age, we need the previous job information, we need even the seniority on the job that we don't have. And this is actually what we would like to get from IMPS. So hopefully, finger crossed, we would like to get this information, because we know that this is exactly something interesting and important to take into account. Then I don't remember the first, the question was... Okay, yes, they do during the labor hour. This is the reason why we have this measure of lost income, because they don't work. So if they do 1 day of training, they don't work in this day. Okay. Sorry? Yeah. Then another question, maybe. Okay.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. Again, on the conto formazione and self-selection problem, so they get back from IMSS a share of the fee paid, but the fee, you said, depends on the number of managers that are enrolled. So did you check for like how many managers, the share of managers in each firm that are enrolled, the firm is paying for? Because maybe you can really find some differences among firms that enroll like one manager, or like, but it's or 50% of all managers and so on, and others that just the top managers. And
so let me just try to say something about this, because one of the problems is that if this is the rule that I explained you, the bigger you are, the better it is to have money available to spend, basically. But if you standardize for the manager, this is not true anymore. So let's say, in a sense, you can sterilize this effect that is related with the size of firm. So I don't know if I get you the question the right way, but it's something that we noticed and thought about, and we thought, okay, maybe if we use a relative measure, we solve at least in part this particular problem. Okay.
So I'm not sure if I understood the answer. So you have
maybe I'm not sure that I understood the question.
Yeah, because the instrument you use, okay, it's a share on the fee, but the fee depends on the number of managers that are enrolled.
Yeah.
And of course it depends on the size, but it also depends on the firm's strategy on how many of their managers they want to enroll. Because a big firm has more managers, but how many managers? And there would be, do you use this share?
Okay, let me take this question as a suggestion. In the sense that maybe, even to convince you, maybe I have to do additional checks about this particular variable, because what you are suggesting is that related with size. And
It's
this
not
can be
related to
problematic.
size. If you decide the share of the share of managers that you decide to enroll, this is more about the strategy and less about the size, and so more about how much is the propensity to educate your managers and so on. And
Okay, so thank you. This is something relevant. Maybe I don't know if I mean. So
sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, but I'm not sure whether I got the point, but I suspect that the issue is about the endogeneity of instruments somehow. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I think that they are pointing at the same issue.
Yeah,
more or less. I mean, the same issue from the point of view we are not convinced by the instrument. That's something.
So thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting to know like the patterns of firms. And I was wondering, you said that you measure firm performance, but you use total factor productivity. But you also mentioned market measures and profitability and so on. Did you account for innovation in terms of either R&D, but also investments? Because maybe what you said is that training tries to change the practices of firms, so maybe you cannot observe a change in total factor productivity, but maybe you observe an increase, I don't know, in R&D, which could be. Of course, it would be nice to control also for the sector, for the industry, because we know that it depends on the industry. And also, I was thinking that it would be nice in the future to check also for the personality traits of women and also the role of soft skills, because you know the 5 personality traits that are so huge right now, there is one of that which is openness, and maybe female managers could have a higher share of this kind of personality trait, and also this could also drive the selection of the sample. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let me just say something about the objective variables. I mean, we did something that is, let's say, parallel to what Bloom and Varnine did. So they check, I mean, when they look for the effort of praxis, they look for the effort and not only in TFP, but also in return on asset, return on equity, or other measure of profitability, let's say, maybe, yes, with all the problems related with these measures, okay. But unfortunately, we don't have anything about R&D. So you know that if you look at the balance sheets information, well, there is R&D, but it's a mess in Italy at least, given the legislation, because it's not compulsory to put there the R&D expenses. So most of the time, for example, are hidden in labor costs, other expenses, so it's marketing, so it's a mess. So it's not reliable, and we don't have precise information about this. Even if you're right, it could be extremely interesting, because the idea is so let me just put it this way. You are right, but this is also related to what I said with what I said some minutes ago about the longer time span efforts. Because if you are right, if the effort is only R&D innovation, well, in the end you expect in the future another effort. So you are right, it's something that we have clear into our mind, but we don't have the information at the moment.
And could public funds, for example, for the Ministry of Economic Development, be used as a proxy?
So which one? So say it again?
The funds from the Ministry of, I don't know, Economic Development, for example, be used as a proxy to track innovation, in the sense that firms who do training and that apply to some kind of funds have a higher probability of increasing their performance, and maybe there could be also a link to the role of female managers.
Yeah,
because
it could
we
be,
have
but
some
again, you must have this information. You have to collect this information. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Thank you.
Any other question from PhD students? And then otherwise we can move to. Is there a question from the Zoom? Boys and girls over there.
Actually, yes. If there is still time, I have a small question, Sandro.
Yes, there is, Carlo. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So basically, I was wondering whether if you have the possibility to check, let's say, for the type of contract through which the manager is, employed in the firm, in the sense that in Italy, a lot of, or I guess the majority of contracts, let's say, forecast a fixed number of hours of training per year. So maybe it could be interesting to have a fixed base to see the difference in time in terms of hour in each firm, from the fixed and compulsory hour and the additional one, to have to go, let's say, in the direction of having a kind of proxy of the voluntarity of the formation, of the training. Thank you.
Okay. So you are suggesting to use which information? Say it again.
The amount of time included in the contract.
Okay.
Devoted that has to be in a compulsory way devoted to training.
Okay, this is an interesting suggestion, but for the future, hopefully, because we don't have this information at the moment about the type of contract. But if we will have this information, maybe we can do something in this direction to refine the result about the voluntarity. This is true. So you are right.
Okay, thank you.
No,
good luck then.
Thank you.
Right. So now we move to faculty questions.
More difficult questions.
Yes, now the degree of difficulty increases.
Is even worse now. Okay.
I know, it's not sad. Okay, Alberto.
No, I expect suggestion for the future development, not. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. I've got a series of points. I'll try to select some. As anticipated, the first one relates to the instrument. When you were presenting, I did a little bit of research, and my understanding is that these 70% of the 0.3% that goes in the conto formazione goes towards training purposes in general. So it may also be used by other actors that are not necessarily managers, but could be other type of employees. Okay, and so here I've got. This point connects to a previous question that I have, because you are basically cleaning your results from sorting effects, a la laser, for instance. So more productive companies are able to hire better employees. In this particular case, are able to train them better, and you capture for that. But actually, if you look at the recent work, for instance, by Aguillon, Blandel, and Griffith, for instance, what they say is that what actually affect on the productivity is not necessarily only high-skilled individuals, but also how they are complemented by lower-skilled individuals. And in particular, the fact that, and this is particularly difficult to capture because high-skilled individuals like managers, for instance, or engineers have skills that are easier to be observable compared to, for instance, clerical workers who have got talents that are much more difficult to capture. But what they show is actually that what matters for, in particular, innovation at the firm level is that the clerical workers matter a lot. The reason is that, in few words, they make life of sort of creative people much easier. Okay, so they basically making the machine functioning much better. So here I've got a problem in your analysis, because okay, you're able to clean sorting, but in my opinion, you're not that able to control for the available availability at the firm level of other types of skills that are not necessarily those possessed by managers. And I'm afraid that the way in which your instrument is identified does aggravate this problem, in fact, because you're able to, you're plugging in noise, which is the training that goes to also to low-skilled workers or mid-skilled workers. So it's a little bit like problematic maybe to solve, but I just wanted to flag this thing. And then I've got a question related to the heterogeneity, because you're doing a nice work. Like the results are interesting, but like I would like to understand a little bit better what you're pointing to. Heterogeneity, like you're talking about science and technology sectors. Are you referring to science-based or specialized suppliers in the PAVI taxonomy? Science-based. Okay.
Science-based.
And then question, then I finished, like, what about the quantification? So what is the effect of spending €1 to, on training for female managers compared to €1 that goes to male managers, or €1 that goes to other type of training for other people?
Okay. Okay, for the first point, I mean, you are right. This can be a problem, so thank you for this observation, because this is something that we have in the future to take a look at. So it's something relevant, you are right. Complementarity, but at the moment we don't have any information, unfortunately. So this is an issue that we cannot do so much, but I know that you are right. About the second point, I mean, what is, we don't have this estimation about the how to say the effectiveness of males and females separately. I don't know if we can do this actually. Maybe if when we have the number of male managers and female managers, we can do something in this respect. Otherwise, it's problematic. At least it's not precise the estimation that we can do, I guess. So it's something that this result would be the final result in a sense, because with these two numbers, well, you can say a lot. And if you differentiate the numbers according to the sector, well, you did your job. This is the end of the journey. But we are a bit far away from this actually, given the data problems that we have. I mean, as usual, you had to make some compromises here and there. We did a lot. It was a long process with the Fondirigenti to build this database, because you can imagine they don't have, just to mention one of the most important projects that we had, they had more than one record for each firm. Why? Because firms can decide to register different, they call matricola. So in each matricola, it's not clear even the number of managers that they can register. So in the end, you have to understand for each matricola why they decide to register another matricola, if the older one is substituting a new one, if you have to adapt the two, and so on and so forth. So it was not so easy to summarize these different lines before we did the same Codice Fiscale, for example, to summarize these lines because well, they belong to the same firms. No, because you had also to understand if the matricola was still in place, it was used, or it was there, and it was about the same managers. So it was a long process with them, and you cannot imagine how hard it was to convince the computer guys to extract this information for us. It was almost impossible for them, because I mean, the database was not thought to be used in the way that we would like to analyze them. Okay. But maybe this is something that you know very well if you work with data, because this is a typical problem. So administrative database on one side is not talking at all with the statistical database that you would like to use. It's a typical problem. Yes, Andrea.
My turn? Okay. Thank you, Roberto, for the presentation. I'll try to ask questions on things that haven't been covered so far, so I'll spare you on the instrument. Actually, I had one curiosity more than a question, and maybe a suggestion for future research. The first one is when you presented the descriptive statistics, I'm not sure, but I was curious to understand. My understanding is that you dropped observations for which you have a zero value in your variable of interest, which is firms with female managers that don't get any training.
Well,
did I understand it well?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
Because if you use the two-stage method, well, actually in the second stage you work only with those that have a positive number there.
Okay. So you don't have this firm. So I was just wondering whether this has any implications for your results. Maybe the results hold if you include also those. Maybe the magnitude is a bit lower. So it was just curiosity on that. And the other one, the other point I want to make is maybe a suggestion for the future. I think here you're offering conceptually a sort of atomistic perspective on how employees work within a firm. We're saying if that specific individual get a training, this has an effect on productivity, innovation, etc. But I think how things work within a firm are in terms of teams. So it's not just a single individual that has a direct effect on firm performance, but the fact that a female or a woman or a man get training is a team choice. That team needs to acquire certain competencies. There is some training opportunities. Sometimes these opportunities are taken by men or by a woman. And the point is that these training opportunities create competencies that complement the existing competencies within a team. And I think beyond the atomistic perspective, a team perspective for future research would really be interesting, I guess. But I don't know this literature at all. So.
No, it's interesting. You are right. And so thank you for this observation. But the only point is how to get this information. Yeah, you are right. It's interesting.
Well, one suggestion for this, which is
yeah.
interesting, and it relates a little bit to the complementarity issue, but again, it's not complementarity between I and law or I and mid, it's among I.
See, it's an horizontal, if you like,
yeah,
versus vertical complementarity.
Could be to try and account for, you said you've got multiple entries for firms, for the same firm, and see whether, you know, the same firm send all female to the training or a mix of them. So trying to get some metric of, you know, the combination of gender that goes to training.
Thank you.
Any other question? You. Yeah, we still have time.
Okay. Thank you, Roberto. I was really interested in the presentation, as I have also a paper on a similar topic, and there's an increasing growing literature on this how to train managers. And I have a couple of comments and one question. I know the literature, so I'm not going through the literature now. One question is related to what Alberto already said about the instrument empirical strategy. So the point is that, as I said, if you use the amount of funds spent on training, do you think that this is itself a measure of selection? So I mean, this actually measures the selection firms have in, I mean, to be prone to invest in additional training and so on. So I think there's some problem, might be some problem with the exclusion restriction, and maybe one solution might be to use some, say, not aggregated, like the median or the mean of the funds in the distribution, something more exogenous, not firm specific. I mean, firm specific, but based on like some statistical measure. This might be partially, maybe mitigate, I don't know. Another selection sources is for women. I mean, firm would choose to invest on training, on female training is already selected, I think. So I mean, it is just a representation of selection, because maybe firms may be more prone to hire, to train females than males. So maybe, is there any quota on the allocation? Is there an allocation rule for funds or any quota for females or something like that?
No.
No.
To my knowledge, no.
Yeah, because that might be a good
No, I get
solution.
the point. Your point is you have the first process of selection is I train or not. The second selection is I train women or not.
Yeah, because you focus on women, so that might be just another representation itself for selection for women in the case of
the
gender,
only point
gender
is how
selection.
to control for this.
If you control for what?
For the second sources of selection, the women.
Yeah, but I'm saying that, in my view, the share of women working on that firm is itself a representation of selection. Because just, I mean, firm may express more propensity to hire women and so on. So that's the point. Yeah, the idea would be to use some quota, some kind of allocation rule that is just separated from the pre-selection of firms in gender. And the other is the sample composition. I mean, you have a great heterogeneity in the treatment. You have maybe training for, I don't know, maybe maybe safety or other more specific training programs. So this basically prevents you from providing more information on the mechanism behind this effect. So maybe, I mean, what's the mechanism behind? It's just more knowledge, additional knowledge provided to managers, or maybe you can disentangle more precisely the effect through the information you have on the different treatment, different type of funds, maybe.
Okay.
And just the question is, did you try to benchmark the results with the literature? Because, for instance, there's a paper, very nice paper by Alessandra Fenizia, who used IMPS data. Do you know that paper?
No? Alessandra?
Fenizia. So basically, she analyzes the effects of productivity using manager rotation, and they estimate an effect of about 10%, so it's quite big effect. Other papers, like for instance the one by Giorcelli, estimate an effect that range between 6 and 15%, so huge effect. So I was surprised that the effect that appears is about just 2% for men and maybe 1% for women.
Yep.
So it's quite small. So do you have just a justification for these small effect size, or?
Well, no. I mean, no, we don't have a justification. We try to understand if it's so small that it's negligible. Well, it seems it's not negligible, but we have to compare. Yeah, we must understand why. I mean, I will take a look at this paper to understand what is the source. Maybe it's related with the fact that maybe, as the other observation is doing, it's related with the fact that maybe you have a series of motivations why you have an increase in TFP that are not inside this my formula. Yeah. This can be something, I mean.
Manager. Yeah, no, that's it.
I was too late.
It's too late.
No, I was too late in giving the mic to Alessandro. Okay, any other question?
So thank you, because I received a lot of comments, and then
I might have a very last comment and a close-up, unless you want yourself closing up. And there's the question, suggestion, I don't know what to call it, is the follow-up of what Alberto was saying before, that you are missing the complementarity between the managerial skills and the other skills, right? But you might have a complementarity that you do not actually exploit between trained female managers and trained managers overall, which are the two variables that you have. And I'm wondering whether it could be argued that the impact of trained female managers vary with the amount of training that we have in the firm in general. So if you can play with an interaction between the two terms, and if you can expect that the general training level of a firm positively or negatively moderate the impact of training on female on TFP. I don't know. I mean, in a theoretical way, I think this is something that could be argued. And at least these are two things that you have already there, because the majority of the other things that we are suggesting you don't have it among the data. So I don't know.
Okay, it's something interesting.
And to conclude, I have to say that I'm very happy to see how debated this session has been.
Yeah.
Let me tell you that you are one of the first paper which comes here with FEB data, with not such a large regional focus, right? But to me, this is still relevant for our community. There's a very nice paper which has just been published in Regional Studies that I mentioned to Roberto yesterday by Anthony Frigon and David Rigby, whose title is quite nice to say, "Where do regional capabilities reside?" And actually, one of the points is that many of these capabilities that we are used to deal at the regional level are in the firms that are located in the regions, okay? And this is, apart from the fact that the article is very interesting and you can read it, but it's an argument about making, these two streams of literature talk to each other, okay? So firm level evidence are extremely relevant for the regional perspective and the regional geographical community that we are using. And I think there's also scope for this paper to be used and extended in an empirical setting, because Roberto has got the location, in principle, of these firms. He can know where they are located, and the firm level information that he has can be complemented with information about the region where these firms are located. And the two kinds of info data can be nicely combined also to face what Roberto was saying, Andrea was saying about the atomistic view of the firms, right? So these firms are not atoms, they are located in regional system. But in addition to looking at the regional system, it's nice to look at the actors themselves, okay? And yeah,
I took some notes because this is our next paper,
yeah,
right? Okay,
should be. should be. Okay, thank you, Roberto, thank you very much.
No, let me thank you, because it was, in the future I would like to come here more, because for paper development it's extremely helpful, because you have tough question and tough observation on the methodological point of view, also observation in the, let's say, the theoretical background, what I was looking for. So it was really interesting, it was really important. It's not so common to find seminars in which we have so many comments. So I appreciate it a lot. Thank you to everyone.
We are very pleased. Thank you very much.
Thank you to everyone.